As the title of this video says, I love Nightreign. I am obsessed with it and I have more than 500 hours of playtime in this game. As someone who loved Elden Ring but have been relatively new to the gaming world, I was very skeptical of Nightreign when it was first announced in 2024. FromSoft has always been known for its Soul-style single-player RPG games, and Nightreign is a pretty big departure from the tried-and-true formula. Despite my skepticism, I was instantly drawn to the fast-paced, action-packed, adrenaline-inducing expeditions in the world of Nightreign. For anyone who isn't familiar with the game, Nightreign follows these 45-minute expeditions where you play as one of the 8 preset characters, Nightfarers as called in the game. You and your team are dropped into a randomized map where you will spend the next 30 minutes or so fighting enemies, gathering loot and buffs in preparation for the final Nightlord. The first dozen times I played Nightreign, I was constantly lost in the map, but excited to find out the secrets of every inch of the map. Now that I have so much experience in this game, playing feels like comfort. It feels like home. Every single time I boot up this game, I feel a sense of familiarity and adrenaline rush, enthralled in the wondrous environment and adventure in Linfeld. I think I might be addicted to it. I can easily foresee this game to be the most replayed game in my library, months and maybe years from now. But as much as I absolutely love this game, it is not to say there are no faults to its game mechanics, player experience, and sometimes enemy and boss designs that I am just downright confused by and hate. So in this video, I want to be honest about where I think Nightreign still has lots of room for improvement, but more importantly, why I am so deeply in love with this game and why you should be too. I'll be covering boss and enemy designs, map and environment layouts, online multiplayer mechanics, weapons and loot rewards, as well as overall gameplay experience. This video will also contain footage of my own gameplay, so I can't guarantee that there won't be spoilers. I want to start with the bads, the areas of this game I think are lacking in one way or another, and the types of changes or additions I'd like to see in the future. It might sound like I am complaining a lot about this game, and you might be wondering, oh, if she hates it so much, why is she playing? Then trust me, I point out these flaws with love because the positives of this game are overwhelming. Alright, let's get into it. The majority of the game lies in Day 1 and Day 2, culminating in 2 day bosses that are supposed to be mini skill checks and small highlights. The day bosses varies for each Nightlord, but are quite repetitive in that there are a small roster of day bosses possible for each Nightlord. After a few playthroughs, honestly even under 10 rounds for each Nightlords, you begin to know which boss to expect as soon as the mobs before the boss appear. The addition of some Dark Souls bosses is really fun, but overall there are a tiny portion of all the bosses available in this game. Some bosses in placement needs major rework. I have a bone to pick with the Bell-bearing Hunter specifically. He is tanky and barely stagger. Riposte window is tiny, so if you're not directly standing in front or behind him when he posture breaks, good luck getting a riposte on him. By now, the Nightreign community has the meme of when you play with randoms and they see Bell-bearing Hunter in the basement of the castle and immediately turn around, then it's a good player. New players will dive in, and no matter what level you are, you almost always get one shot. It cannot be that the sign of a good player is to not engage with the boss, because then why put the boss there to begin with? Trolls. This one's okay. It's doable in that if you coordinate well with your friends or stick together with randoms and be careful when you pick them off one by one, it is doable. But overall, me personally, I just sigh and shake my head every time I hear the trolls roar when I get close. The spider boss, Duke's Dear Freya. How do I begin? This feels like a gank fight, but not even like chaotic in a good way. You've got this 2-headed spider that has the gimmick of only taking damage on the head. Alright, fine. But then this boss is programmed to literally turn its head away from you always, which I suppose makes sense in a naturalistic way, but all the while you're chasing its head, trying to hit it, a million little spiders are spewing poison and trying to grab you and munch on you. So I mean, just no. Enemy camps in this game are always so interesting because you've got a full camp of people, and somehow only 3 of the captain-looking guys are the bosses. I'm not sure if part of the fun was supposed to be figuring out who the boss is, but honestly I feel like you shouldn't have to literally commit genocide to figure out who the boss is at the beginning. Also, maybe give us real bosses and not just normal Elden Ring trash mobs that have 10,000 poise. So I get how some of the day 1 and day 2 bosses are duos or trios, so that when you do play with 2 or 3 people, the boss aggro is evenly distributed. But in the solo mode of this game, I feel like these multi-bosses need to be balanced more. At least the guys on horses like Knight's Cavalry or the Royal Cavalry with Draconic Tree Sentinel or Tree Sentinel. The only one that feels good to fight is the Crucible Knight and the Hippo combo. I think that one works because the hitbox of the Crucible Knight and the Hippo vary in size, and their movement speed and pattern are wildly different. The last one is a little bit nitpicky, but I personally very much dislike super jumpy bosses, especially in an open field environment. Red Wolf and the Black Knife Assassin are pretty good examples of this. They spend the majority of the time jumping around, which kind of just leaves me standing and waiting for them to finish their combo and wait for my opening. The maps of Nightreign are separated into the normal maps that have the same terrain with different arrangements of points of interests, and the map with terrain changes that are called the Shifting Earth events. Despite the roguelike nature of the randomized map layout and loot drops, Nightreign does not have true map randomizations. The basic terrain is always exactly the same, with the exceptions of these events that change a quarter of the map, but even so, each Shifting Earth is exactly the same every time it spawns, and the occurrence of the events further limits the variety of the rest of the maps. Once you know the layout of the map, you even begin to remember the exact seed more or less. There is something to be said about the comfort I feel when I play a particular seed I like, but overall the repetition of the environment hurts the game more so, in my opinion. The whole fun of this game is to gather loots and buffs that would further help your particular build, but a lot of the times weapon drops and buff rewards are very non-consistent. I have noticed that certain classes will have an easier time getting a boss drop that works for them, like Recluse or Revenant, whereas classes like Iron Eye and Guardian struggles more to get weapon drops that work for them. Now there is something to be said about encouraging weapon trades between teammates, which don't get me wrong, when you receive or give a weapon from your teammate, it instantly feels like we are truly a team. But when you're in a solo session, the weapon drops should be more focused on your own build. This point goes even further when it comes to buffs that you get from the end of day bosses. They are almost always completely random, to the point that I would say more than 60 to 70% of the time they are completely useless. Like, what am I supposed to do with a guard counter buff as a recluse? For certain characters, this might not be an issue, as I feel like most of the buffs cater towards guard counters, parrying, etc. So if you're Guardian, I guess this works in your favor. For the rest of the classes, not so much. One of the defining and unique characteristics of Nightreign within FromSoft's repertoire is the fact that it is designed for multiplayer. While you can play solo in its solo mode, it is pretty clear that this game is designed with multiple players in mind. If you play with your friends and you guys are able to be on voice chat, then what I am about to point out might not apply. But in my personal experience, I spend about 60 to 70% of my gameplay time playing with randoms, as sometimes my friends are just not available. If my math is correct, I have played with at least 1,000 random players at this point. Overall, my experience has been extremely positive, but I will touch on this later. What I consider to be the flaws of this system lies in the matchmaking and execution of this multiplayer format. First of all, players communicate on how to route their points of interest via pings. You can agree with someone else's ping, or you can place a pin yourself. This method sounds like it should work in sort of a voting system, but as players get more and more familiar with the map layout, lots of people start to plan ahead, pinging multiple points of interest in succession to indicate a route. What could easily solve this messy and at times annoying system is just to add a numeric tag to the pings, so that if someone were to indicate a route, you can clearly see that at least 3 pings in succession without having a bunch of pings going off every few seconds. The next one I want to talk about is a feature that I am actually surprised is not already incorporated into the game. I think at the very beginning when the game was launched, there were a lot of cases of people rage quitting when things don't go their way, or they have died way too many times for them to want to continue. I feel like there should be a way to vote to disband the session. An anonymous 3-way vote could help mitigate some of the negative feelings that arise from a teammate alt F4ing simply because they don't want to continue. The last one is kind of on the flip side. There have been quite a few matches where I loved playing with a random. I felt like we were very much on par skill-wise, and the overall gameplay style and decision-making really gel well together. I wish there is a way to friend someone in-game so that if they are online next time, you guys can go for another round. I have heard it might be a thing on console, but I'm not sure. But as far as PC goes, the feature would be really good enhancement to the online multiplayer experience. Alright. It might sound like I have spent so much of the video talking about what I dislike about the game, but it is only because I love the game so much otherwise that I feel like these fixes could even further my enjoyment of the game. The next part, I want to cover the central point of this video, and that is exactly why I am in love with Nightreign. The most unique thing that sets Nightreign apart from other FromSoft games is its own self-contained roguelike elements. Because each session is roughly 40 minutes, there are very well-defined segments of experience. Even as an Elden Ring player, I believe in the get good philosophy, and I spend many hours in playthroughs trying to improve my skills. Nightreign encapsulates this progression perfectly in these sessions. When I am thinking about how to improve my next session, I pay very close attention to my knowledge of the map, my mastery of boss movesets, and my understanding of each character's strengths and weaknesses. Every session, I feel like I am constantly learning and improving, and every once in a while, I feel like I reach a skill threshold where I start to feel exponential growth and experience. Combined with an element of RNG, this is what keeps Nightreign addictive for me. There is always something to learn, something to improve. There is a sense of security in knowing that as long as I want to, this wallet of entertainment will never dry out. Souls games have always been known for its customizable feature. Part of the fun of Dark Souls and Elden Ring was to decide where you want your XP to go. Do you want a Dex character or a Strength Faith build? In base Elden Ring, I was able to complete many playthroughs while keeping the game fresh because I was able to be hyper-specific about my stat distribution. Nightreign took a 180 with this approach. Predetermined class became very interesting to explore, adding layers to the replayability of the game. Each class feels carefully designed with special abilities and ultimate arts that make sense for each character, both in lore and in mechanics. My favorite 3 characters are Duchess, Recluse, and Revenant, and they happen to be the 3 squishiest characters of this game. The developers knew that, and they gave these characters very unique ways of staying alive. Duchess with her double dodge, which I've come to realize that when I time it correctly, I land directly behind the enemies for a critical hit. This feels very well designed since Duchess's entire build is around daggers and quick movements. Recluse's dodge covers the longest distance, which keeps her out of harm's way since her spellcasting requires a safe distance. Revenant has her summons to help draw aggro, and when necessary, her ult Immortal March to keep her and her summons alive. Each character also feels entirely different when playing solo versus in a team. I've read a lot of comments on Reddit and the comment sections of YouTube videos where people would replay the game just to get to know and master each individual class. This feature alone boosts the replayability of the game. I went back to play Elden Ring recently, and the biggest whiplash was that fall damage used to be a thing, and Surge Sprint was not. The fall damage is a separate thing, but Nightreign has sped up the movement so much that Elden Ring almost feels sluggish. I did the obligatory crouch when I attempted to Surge Sprint, and just crouch walked all over the place like an idiot. The addition of Surge Sprint adds extra adrenaline to the action and actually makes boss fights feel that much more intense. I strongly believe that this is a feature FromSoft needs to incorporate in their future single-player games. As much as I pointed out some of the flaws in the system, I do want to emphasize that 80 to 90% of my experience with the player base has been extremely positive. Despite the lack of any verbal or written communication methods, it is amazing to see that the community has developed ways of communicating with one another. Whether it is emoting with predetermined gestures, or pinging weapons and swinging their characters side to side to indicate offering, I am often amused and touched by the consideration the community has for one another. The highlights of this multiplayer experience for me has got to be the synergy within a team. Even though most teams I've been in work really well together, every once in a while I get teams where the members have great skills, work strategically, and coordinate super well. At every turn, we lift each other up, taking turns and working together to annihilate one boss after another. The lack of communication in these moments almost enhanced the synergy, because I am locking in and paying close attention to what the other teammates are doing. Not gonna lie, I ride the highs of these sessions way after the game is over. I have so many good things to say about Nightreign that I almost forgot the most important part of this game, the objective, to vanquish the Nightlords. The base game has 8 different Nightlords, each with a unique elemental weakness. The first time seeing these bosses always has my jaw on the floor. The rhythm and pace of the Nightlord fights feel very different from one another. That each expedition for different Nightlords always has me anticipating the final boss. The soundtracks fit the theme of the visuals and the lore of each Nightlord, making the culmination of every expedition feel well worth the time. I personally love the game leading up to the Nightlord, so even if I don't make it to the end, I still very much enjoy the process. But when I do make it to the final boss, I feel like I am being treated to beautiful cinema, invigorating combat, and the ultimate test to personal skill and teamwork. At the end here, I want to talk about my general thoughts about the game and the parts that really stood out to me as the highlights of my experience. I got to try a wide variety of Elden Ring weapons in this game that I otherwise would never think to pick up in the base game. I learned to work with every weapon I pick up, evaluating their passive and seeing if I can work it to my build. Playing Nightreign has actually reignited my urge to play Elden Ring again, maybe trying out some of these previously out-of-the-way weapons and builds. Not only does weapon variety require some decision making, I think to play successfully in Nightreign, you have to really build and hone your quick decision making on the fly. Where do we go next? Which weapon do I pick up? Which boss is worth the time to kill? Do I risk losing a level to grab an extra flask in the rain? These are just some examples of the types of questions you have to consider while playing the game. And I feel like to this end, Nightreign always feels so exhilarating for me. As I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, I truly think that Nightreign has a huge value in replayability, and future DLCs will come out with even more Nightfarers and bosses, which will only add to the longevity of this game. Alright, I am pretty much done with the flaws and highlights of Nightreign. I will always have so many good things to say about this game that I will never shut up about it. I hope I have convinced you to either give this game a try or fall in love with it. But at the end of the day, these opinions of mine are extremely personal, so if you're watching this video, put your thoughts in the comment section down below. Alright, until next time, bye.